Pep Guardiola, overthinking. Guardiola is the kind of manager who can walk into a press conference, say 2 sentences, and instantly split the entire football world in half. Half the room calls him a genius, the other half swears he's ruining football with inverted everything. And buried right in the middle of all that brilliance is Pep's biggest problem, his obsession with tweaking every tiny detail until the entire match becomes a tactical science experiment. From the moment he stepped into coaching, you could see the pattern forming. At Barcelona, everything was simple because the players fit the system like they were built in a lab. At Bayern, the gears started spinning faster. You could literally track how the Champions League nights became his personal chessboard. Juventus-style traps, Atletico deep blocks. Pep would come in with a structure so complicated that even Bayern fans were like, "Bro, who's playing fullback today?" Fast forward to Manchester City, and the legend of the Pep brain spiral grew even bigger. There's a whole documentary arc about it. The nights where he'd switch to unexpected formations, push defenders into midfield, drag midfielders to the last line, and create shapes no one had ever seen. The problem? Those ideas show up on the biggest nights of the season. Lyon in 2020, Chelsea in 2021. Games where City were the stronger team, yet Pep arrived with a lineup that sent shockwaves through the football world. No holding midfielder, a shape that nobody trained for. Runners in zones the players didn't naturally occupy. It was peak Pep, trying to beat teams with a blueprint they never asked for. And the craziest part is that this overthinking doesn't come from fear. Pep just has a constant itch to solve puzzles. If someone presses differently, he wants new angles. If they sit deeper, he wants new structures. If he senses a numerical advantage, he wants to overload it in 3 different dimensions. It's innovation to the point where even his own players look surprised during warm-ups. Some players thrive under that intensity, but others get mentally exhausted trying to memorize every positional cue. The football's beautiful, nobody denies that, but the system relies on flawless execution, especially under pressure. José Mourinho, paranoia. His career feels like a documentary with 2 narrators fighting over the microphone. One voice calls him one of the greatest managers the sport has ever seen. The other whispers about the chaos that follows him everywhere he goes. And right in the center of that split is the thing that defines Mourinho more than any formation, trophy, or press conference one-liner: his paranoia. With Mourinho, every club begins like a honeymoon. Players buy into him instantly. He speaks with confidence, carries himself like a man who already knows the ending, and turns an entire dressing room into his personal army. At Porto, Chelsea, Inter, Real Madrid, those first seasons were electric. Training felt unified. Press conferences sounded like declarations. Even the fans walked differently when he showed up. Mourinho created that effect. His belief was contagious. But then something shifts. Slowly, quietly. He starts sensing threats everywhere. A small disagreement becomes a warning sign. A poor performance becomes a betrayal. A board decision becomes an attack on his authority. And the moment he feels the environment shifting, the walls start going up. He shuts people out. He builds an us against them mentality so strong that even minor criticism feels like a conspiracy. This is where the pattern begins. He starts questioning players publicly. He tests their loyalty. He challenges the media. At times, he looks like he's fighting an entire city by himself. In Madrid, the tension with Iker Casillas grew so sharp that the entire dressing room split down the middle. At Chelsea, the second spell exploded when relationships fractured over the medical staff incident, and the team spiraled emotionally. At Manchester United, he went to war with board decisions and called out players with brutal honesty. And at Spurs, he barely made it long enough to form a second chapter. His paranoia creates 2 realities around him. When he turns it outward, toward opponents, toward the league, toward the world, his squad becomes unstoppable. At Inter Milan, players still talk about how he convinced them they were being hunted by everyone, and they responded by fighting like their careers were on the line every match. But when that paranoia turns inward, when it begins to target his own players, his own board, and his own staff, everything unravels, because the same fire that made him legendary begins burning the room he's standing in. He has brilliance, charisma, trophies, iconic moments, everything a manager dreams of. But the story always circles back to the same theme. Once he senses danger, real or imagined, he prepares for war. And when the fight begins, there's no pause button, no soft landing, no way back. Zinedine Zidane, no tactical identity. He has one of the calmest presences football has ever seen. He stands on the touchline like a man watching traffic, hands in pockets, expression fixed, heartbeat probably at 47 beats per minute. And behind that calm aura lies the biggest problem coaches, analysts, and even his own players quietly bring up. Nobody really knows what Zidane's teams are supposed to be. He built a dynasty at Real Madrid, but the success grew out of player chemistry, big game moments, and elite man management rather than a recognizable tactical blueprint. Ask someone what Zidane's signature style is, and the answer usually leans toward vague descriptions. They were balanced, they adapted, they just found a way. That might sound poetic, but it's vague for a reason. Madrid's system under him was fluid in a way that often meant the players figured it out on the pitch. That worked when the squad was stacked with leaders who didn't need step-by-step instructions. Sergio Ramos controlled the entire backline like a field general. Luka Modric conducted the midfield tempo. Cristiano Ronaldo solved scoring droughts with one swing of the boot. Toni Kroos handled every build-up like a surgeon. Zidane's strength was keeping that ecosystem stable. He kept egos aligned, pressure low, and roles clear enough so the team didn't implode. But tactically, there wasn't a distinct structure. No signature press, no iconic positional play, no trademark pattern teams feared. Instead, Zidane leaned heavily on adaptability and individual brilliance. When the players were peaking, it looked genius. When certain pieces were missing, everything looked loose. His second spell exposed it more clearly. Ronaldo gone, Modric aging, injuries across the squad. Suddenly, the reliance on player freedom felt like a weakness. Madrid often played in phases that felt improvised, moments of brilliance surrounded by long stretches of uncertainty. They still competed at a high level, but the clear identity, that elite manager's imprint, never appeared. He is a phenomenal motivator, a calming force, a psychological anchor players trust. The issue is that his system rarely leaves a tactical fingerprint. Without megastars doing the heavy lifting, the framework feels thin. Hansi Flick, the high line collapse. He arrived at Barcelona with a suitcase full of ideas and a footballing identity carved during Bayern's most explosive era. The promise was simple: push the team higher, play faster, dominate with intensity, and bring back some of that frightening vertical rhythm that made his Bayern side look like a hurricane on grass. But the moment he tried to apply that philosophy at Barca, the biggest issue followed him straight into La Liga. The high line that collapses the second the press loses oxygen. Flick's Barcelona is built on one foundational belief: defend high, win the ball early, and suffocate opponents with pressure. And on paper, the idea fits what Barcelona used to be: high pressing, front foot football, territorial control. It all sounds perfect until you watch how the current squad actually handles those demands. The high line stretches the pitch into a battlefield where every mistake becomes a counter-attack. Flick pushes his back four so aggressively that his centre-backs end up standing only a few meters inside the opponent's half. It works when the press is synchronized and the lines are compact. But the moment one player arrives late, or the midfield loses a duel, or the fullbacks step up too early, the entire defensive structure falls apart. The biggest issue is profile mismatch. Barcelona don't have the physical defenders Flick relied on at Bayern. They don't have Alphonso Davies flying back at 38 km/h, or Alaba sweeping the entire backline with elite recovery sprints. Flick is working with a group that excels on the ball but struggles in open field duels when exposed. La Liga opponents figured it out quickly. Draw the press, play one pass behind the line, and you're running straight at goal with acres of space. Barcelona games under Flick often drift into chaotic exchanges where the team looks stretched thin in transition, legs chasing, midfielders scrambling, centre-backs backpedaling with alarms going off around them. The fatigue factor makes the issue even sharper. Flick's system requires relentless pressing triggers, constant sprinting, and perfect timing. But this squad isn't built for 90 minutes of non-stop vertical chaos. Young players like Gavi and Pedri can read the press well, but they can't compensate for structural gaps alone. Veterans lack the recovery pace needed to bail out the high line when it cracks. If he solves that issue, Barcelona becomes terrifying. If he doesn't, every match becomes a gamble in transition. Diego Simeone, tactical stagnation. Simeone's teams walk onto the pitch like they're entering a war movie. Shirts tucked in with military precision, faces locked in focus, every player moving like they've just been briefed on a classified mission. For over a decade, that identity turned Atletico Madrid into the most disciplined defensive machine in Europe, a unit that defended space with the seriousness of a national border. But that same identity became the biggest obstacle in Simeone's evolution. His issue isn't effort, motivation, or leadership. He still commands the room like a general. The problem lies in how deeply he has rooted the club into one tactical philosophy: the low block, the counterpunch, the narrow lines, the emotional grind. It built Atleti, it made them fearless, it allowed them to punch far above their budget, but it also welded the squad into a shape that has barely moved with football's evolution. Every time football made a major tactical shift, heavy pressing, high possession systems, flexible build-ups, Simeone stuck to the structure that won him titles. It created a cycle where Atletico often looked several steps behind technically superior teams, when Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, Liverpool, or City controlled possession for 70% of the match. Simeone's squads often look trapped in a defensive routine with little room to escape. There's also the creative suffocation. Talented attackers, João Felix, Lemar, Carrasco, Diego Jota, found themselves playing inside a system that rarely gave them the freedom or spacing modern attackers need. Many stagnated or regressed, others left and immediately looked reborn. Felix's Barcelona loan became the clearest example. He looked like a different player the moment he left Simeone's orbit. And then comes the contrast between the squad profiles and the tactical demands. Atletico's recent teams have had technical midfielders, crafty attackers, modern fullbacks, yet Simeone kept guiding them back into a structure made for 2015, not 2025. When Atleti tried to adopt more possession-based football in certain seasons, the identity clashed with the muscle memory built over a decade. They drifted in and out of shapes, never fully committing. He remains one of the greatest managers of the modern era. His man management, motivation, and defensive organization are elite, but his long-term challenge has always been the same: adapting a rigid system to a sport that refuses to stop evolving. Lionel Scaloni, Messi dependency. Lionel Scaloni built one of the most emotionally connected teams in modern football. Argentina under him didn't look like a national squad. They looked like a family playing for one man, one armband, one legacy. Training sessions turned into rituals. Matches felt like pilgrimages. Every run, tackle, and every clearance had the same silent message behind it: make life easier for Messi. And that devotion became both Scaloni's greatest strength and his biggest problem. He unlocked a version of Messi that Argentina had chased for a decade. He reorganized the midfield so Messi didn't need to drop deep. He built transitional patterns so Messi could receive the ball between the lines without fighting through traffic. He stationed hard-working wingers to stretch the pitch, and he turned players like De Paul, Molina, and Julian Alvarez into extensions of Messi's rhythm. It worked, historically. Copa America, Finalissima, the World Cup. A team aligned behind its leader found perfect balance, and the results tell that story forever. But the flip side is unavoidable. The entire system revolves around one man. Even when Messi is not in peak physical form, the structure bends towards him. Build-ups slow down when he demands the ball. Pressing sequences wait for him to join. Passing lanes orient toward his zone. Opponents know it. Fans know it. Analysts know it. And Argentina themselves know it. This creates a long-term issue that Scaloni still hasn't fully solved. When Messi plays fewer minutes, the identity becomes blurry. Some matches drift into uncertainty because the system instinctively waits for patterns that only exist when Messi is present. Younger attackers hesitate, choosing the safe pass instead of the creative one. The team presses less aggressively because the shape defaults to preserving Messi's energy. Even tactical changes, new formations, different profiles often get adjusted back toward the familiar rhythm. Undeniably, Scaloni is a brilliant man manager and a sharp in-game adjuster. But the next chapter of his coaching career depends on whether he can shape Argentina into a team that functions with the same clarity when the number 10 isn't the center of the universe. Mauricio Pochettino, the trophy curse. He has the aura of a manager who always seems one step away from greatness. Every club he joins ends up praising his leadership, empathy, his tactical clarity, and the way he transforms players mentally and physically. He rebuilds squads, he stabilizes chaos, he develops youngsters into stars, he builds teams that run, press, and fight with identity. And yet, every story with him hits the same invisible ceiling. No trophies, no final chapter, no signature moment. His biggest problem is the long shadow of that unbreakable curse. His teams reach the doorstep of history, knock loudly, and then freeze at the finish line. At Tottenham, he engineered one of the most impressive long-term rebuilds in modern Premier League history. He turned Spurs into title contenders on a budget that couldn't compete with the Giants. The pressing system reached its peak between 2016 and 2018. High intensity, fluid rotations, Kane dropping in, Dela finding pockets, Eriksen orchestrating everything. The football was electric, the stadium believed again, Spurs were becoming a force. Then came the 2019 Champions League final, a moment designed for legacy, a moment that could have rewritten Poch's story forever. The team arrived exhausted, emotionally drained, carrying injuries and fatigue from a season where they pushed beyond their limits. Liverpool capitalized early, controlled the game, and the final slipped away from him before it ever felt competitive. For many fans, that was the night the trophy curse became mythology. When PSG came calling, it looked like the perfect escape route, the place where even average managers lift silverware. But Paris is a unique battlefield. The dressing room politics, the superstar hierarchies, the Champions League obsession. Pochettino never found rhythm there. Domestic cups came, but Europe remained a wall. With Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe, the expectations were astronomical. The trophy that mattered most, the Champions League, once again evaded him. Even at Chelsea, despite the rebuilding context, the storyline followed familiar patterns, strong stretches of form, a clear tactical idea, squad improvements, and a campaign that once again lacked a breakthrough turning point. He is an elite builder, a motivator, a teacher. Players improve under him, clubs stabilize under him, dressing rooms unite under him. But trophies require a different edge, a ruthless streak, a shift in mentality during decisive moments, and a tactical boldness he hasn't consistently displayed when the lights burn the brightest. Carlo Ancelotti, complacency. He is football's smoothest operator. While other managers pace the technical area like their heart rate is synced to a drumline, Ancelotti stands there chewing gum with the calmness of a man watching his garden grow. Players love him, clubs trust him, fans relax when he shows up. And that relaxed energy, the coolness, the calm, the everything will be fine aura, is also the core of his biggest problem. He sometimes drifts into complacency. He is a master of managing stars. He understands ego, momentum, mood, and confidence better than almost anyone. At Milan, at Chelsea, at PSG, at Bayern, and at Real Madrid, he stepped into dressing rooms full of world-class personalities and found harmony instantly. No overcomplication, no dogma, no rigid structure that suffocates talent. He gives players freedom and responsibility, and in return, they adore him. But that same freedom becomes a weakness in moments that demand sharper tactical edges. His career shows a pattern. When his squads are elite and balanced, he extracts devastating results. When the team dips or requires structural rebuilding, he often doesn't intervene with the level of tactical micromanagement modern football sometimes needs. His approach relies heavily on experience, natural chemistry, and individual quality. It's a philosophy built on trust, which can turn into over-reliance. At Bayern, the cracks formed quickly, training intensity dropped, sessions became lighter, senior players felt standards slipping, the environment drifted into comfort, and comfort in elite competition becomes lethal. Bayern demanded constant tactical evolution. Ancelotti preferred player-led interpretation. The clash ended abruptly. Same case at Madrid. Whenever the team hits tactical turbulence, defensive inconsistency, aging profiles, transitional issues, Carlo often trusted the squad to manage it instead of forcing structural change himself. None of this diminishes his genius. He is one of the greatest managers in football history, a serial winner whose human touch has crafted some of the most memorable squads of the modern era. His calmness is his superpower. But in eras where football evolves quickly, that same calmness can turn into inertia. Ancelotti thrives when the machine runs smoothly, and sometimes struggles when it needs rewiring. Thomas Tuchel, boardroom wars. Thomas Tuchel walks into a football club the way a storm walks into a coastline. Calm at first, structured, intelligent. And then, before anyone realizes what's happening, everything behind the scenes starts shaking. His biggest problem has never been tactics. Tactically, Tuchel is elite. His teams press with precision, shift like they're connected by invisible wires, and defend in patterns that look like they were scripted by a mathematician. But the real battle with Tuchel doesn't happen on the pitch. It happens in meeting rooms, WhatsApp groups, transfer windows, and late-night conversations where sporting directors start sweating. Every club he joins tells the same story. Dortmund brought him in after Klopp, hoping for stability mixed with tactical evolution. Tuchel delivered structured football, improved performances, better control in big games. Then came the arguments. First about signings, then about training methods, then about decision-making power. One disagreement turned into 10, and within 2 seasons, Dortmund had gone from praising him to quietly preparing his exit papers. PSG was even louder. Then came Chelsea, the wildest chapter. Tuchel arrived mid-season, reorganized the squad in days, and lifted a Champions League trophy in 4 months. Fans adored him, players trusted him, the football world saluted him. But behind closed doors, another storm started forming. Disputes over transfers, disagreements about striker profiles, tension over club direction, and the new ownership clashed with Tuchel from the very first summer. Meetings got tense. Communication broke down. It didn't matter that he had built one of Europe's strongest defensive structures. Chelsea terminated him 6 games into the new season. And Bayern, the moment he landed, he was already stepping into fire. He is brilliant. Everyone sees it. But at every stop, the same pattern unfolds. Tactical mastery on the pitch, turbulence everywhere else. Quite a list, right? Anyway, who did we miss? Comment down below, and if you enjoyed watching the video, you will surely love this one.